And we're live, I think. Cool. So, I have already put the Sprint Epic together this week by talking to everybody individually so that we could just sort of get going with discussing it. Hopefully that makes this meeting go a little bit more smoothly, I think. I should pull the old one out first as well. Let's have a quick look. So, I'm just going to post this in Slack. If Slack lets me. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on there which I've ticked off some of it because I knew it was done, and there's a load of stuff in there which has not been updated, and I'm assuming none of it needs ticking off because most of it's moving forward. Yeah? You could give me a thumbs up. Cool, okay, so with the new Sprint Epic I've tried to trim it down so that rather than just copying across the tasks from the last 2 or 3 epics, because I know they've been the same for a while, I've tried to sort of trim it down and make it more manageable so that when I close the Sprint Epic in 2 weeks' time, it's with most things ticked off. Just so that it's easier to see the progress, and try to take into account a bit more all of the other stuff that goes on in a sprint other than me working on code, which usually happens to be the least thing that I do. Especially with the public code, that's when there's so much going on in the private world. And I'm going to be away for part of this sprint again. I'm travelling rather than on holiday, so I will be around, but I might be on a plane this time in 2 weeks' time, I think.
Nice.
So I might need someone else to take over the meeting again in 2 weeks. So that's pretty much all the news from me. I'm very much aware that I've been putting things on the Sprint Epic which are too open-ended, like refactor a thing, which I don't know how long it's going to take to do a refactor, so I should probably not put that in a Sprint Epic because it can take me 2 weeks, it can take me 2 months. And so yeah, I've got much smaller, much more manageable tasks. And the things that I've put in for the next 2 weeks are to get some of the most high priority migrations written for the next data version, and also to do a release, because it's now been 4 weeks since we did a release, so there has to be one in the next 2 weeks for us to meet our maximum 6-week limit. And I don't know whether that release will be 0.7.9 or whether it will be 0.8.0. It depends on what we get done and where we are. If I do the release in the next couple of days, which I might do, then it will be 0.7.9. It's just a bug fix release. But if I do it towards the end of the 2 weeks, it might be that we have the data migrations in there already, in which case it's 0.8.0. That's right. Yeah.
Cool.
Karen?
I was going to say one thing that might be good if it ends up being a 0.7.9 release is to, if depends on if I can get the PowerFlex stuff switched over, but if we can get rid of jQuery UI and selectize, dropping those 2 big dependencies to cut down on file size, it might be a good idea. But if it ends up holding it up, then I mean that.
So the other thing that I've just done 2 minutes before the meeting is I put together a milestone on GitHub for 0.8.0, and the milestone is for issues that need to go into the minor version. So there'll be things that will get a hold tag on them, so we'll merge them only when we know we're definitely going to do a 0.8 release, if that makes sense. There's only 4 things in there at the moment. I don't expect there to be many things in there. The 4 things are the data migrations, the issue 005 issue, with all the basically the have to stuff, the stuff that's burning, the token table stuff, because that's a separate issue, so we can track it separately, the hashtags thing, which will go in with the 005 stuff because it's basically done. Features all sat there and pull requests just waiting to go in. They just need a bit of cleanup. I'm sure that we can do it all together. And the last thing that I've put in there is removing the old deprecated body classes. That's something that, as part of me doing channels, has sort of become more annoying that it's still in there. And they've been deprecated for well over a year. I think we should just remove them. And it won't cause any breakages. It might just cause some people's styling to go a bit funny if they were relying on really, really old class versions of the classes. but they haven't been documented for over a year. They've been deprecated for over a year. So I'm just going to clear that up and see how that goes. But doing it in a 0.8 version, at least there's some sort of, there's a not a breaking change indicator, but an indicator that something serious has changed there. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do for the next 2 weeks. What do you think of if there's a selectize dependency that needs to be dropped and it needs to go in a particular release, then it's probably worth putting a comment on the sprint epic so that I know. Or if there's an issue, put it and it needs to go in the 0.8 milestone, put it in the 0.8 milestone.
To be honest, I don't think there's a huge kind of dependency on it. It's more of one of those things that as other bits get done, it can just be removed and the file sizes get smaller. As far as features and things like that go, it should just be completely invisible.
Cool. So, does anybody want to talk through what it is that they have put down for the next 2 weeks? And does anybody have any thoughts or feelings on how this process is going? Because I know that we've been doing it for a while now, and yeah, I'm interested to change it if people want to change it.
I'll go first. I think it's worked well, but for me, the last few weeks, it's just been putting open-ended tasks in there, and then also not getting enough time to do any open source work. It's been internal work. But I think once we've got that sorted out and back to how it was before, like the last few weeks, kind of repeated issues, then I think it'll work well still.
For someone who doesn't have any actual issues on any of the sprints, I actually really enjoy the sprints because it's pretty easy to like look at the roadmap and then look at the sprint, and when people ask questions, actually like have some sort of idea on like when something coming, when it's actually being worked on, stuff like that. So as someone who like answers questions for people or whatever in Slack, I definitely like having checkboxes, so it's at least like, is this immediate? Is this maybe soon? Is this who knows? So if nothing else, I really like that.
Yeah, I think it means if it's not in the sprint, then it's just not something that we're currently working on. It doesn't mean that it's been forgotten about. Just know that it's not going to change in the next 2 weeks. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
I like it from the point of view of knowing when 2 weeks goes by, and if I haven't gotten the things that I expected to get done, having a point at which to go. Why did that happen? Even if I don't share it here, there's usually some sort of internal, well, things didn't go to plan, or I didn't take into account the fact that I was doing something else, or that sort of stuff. And at least it gives you a cut-off point. Whereas when it was more open-ended and it was just things got done when they got done, it's very hard to know whether you've met your own expectations, let alone anybody else's, I think.
Totally.
Anybody else?
I had a question about the milestones. Is it time to get rid of the post-Zelda milestone?
Probably. It's just a load of Ember stuff that we wish we could do, but no, maybe not. One day, possibly. Yeah, it's sort of just got a bunch of issues in it, hasn't it, at the moment, that are things that we wanted to fix that haven't gotten fixed, I think.
I mean, it has a bunch of fixed wanted issues, but I mean, post-Zelda, I think, doesn't really mean anything anymore.
No, true. Probably just put them into the normal backlog.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those, they've had the majority of the work done towards them, and they just want some final cleanup, or the issues closing, or new issues created which are very specific to what needs to be finished.
Yeah, it's probably worth us just going through and reviewing those issues at some point, just closing anything that can be closed, raising a new issue if we can do something more specific, and then or moving it out of the milestone just into the general backlog if it's just something that needs doing. I think that's probably the best thing to do. I did start going through some of the issues again at the weekend, and I've earmarked one day this week to go through all of the open pull requests as well, because there's loads and I've been ignoring them a bit. There's so much going on. But try and get through some more of that.
Just looking at some of those post-Zelda issues, those don't seem super difficult, and I think depending on what I can get done on the current sprint issue this week, I may take a crack at some of the smaller ones, like the spin buttons one, because I've been working on something for my regular job that is a kind of the spin button thing, but shows like a post-action, like check or like cross. It's like it worked or it didn't. So
Cool. Yeah, I think all of the preliminary work is in place now because we were waiting for the modals refactor to go in, so that everything was based on promise actions instead of the button not having any idea when it was finished.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why at the moment we have a 1 second delay on everything, even if it's instant, just to make it look like something's happening.
Yeah.
UX. Oh dear. Yeah, that's cool. There's probably a whole bunch of issues on the back end stuff as well that can either be closed or I pulled out the one about the delete endpoints and how they work. That was waiting again. It was waiting on something, and that something's finished. So there's loads of little bits and pieces that can probably just be hoovered up. It's just finding time to hoover them up when there's new stuff to build and other things going on. Sebastian, you have something in the sprint? That never happens.
Yeah, I'm back on the open source project again. I opened the issue for reworking the token structure. Jason already commented on the issue, and I think we need a bit of discussion there. It shouldn't be too difficult. I have plenty of other things to do to keep Ghost Pro running. So I hope I can get it done within the next 2 weeks.
Would that
essentially,
sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say, would that help kind of with the PR that's out there for deleting all of the logged in?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's related. One thing I wanted to do is merge access tokens and refresh tokens into one table. Which is probably something that needs discussion. I prefer having them in the same table. Jason commented that we could just do a one-to-many relationship. I mean, I don't mind. And the second thing is that we need a relation between a refresh token and an access token so that we know which refresh tokens can be deleted when logging out other users.
Yeah. The nice thing about that is that we don't have to worry about the data in those tables.
Yep.
Normally when you refactor a structure like that, it's a pain in the bum because you have to cope with all the data, but with these we can just truncate the table. No worries. Slightly annoyed that everyone gets logged out, but that's by the by really, isn't it? Which reminds me, I was reading back through some of the older issues, and one of them that's still open is to do with extending the session length. And originally we had sessions that only lasted a day, and that was really painful. And we extended it to a week, which now feels much better, much better. The prerequisite for extending them to a month was that we needed to be able to refresh the refresh token, I think.
No.
No?
Well, we wanted to refresh the refresh token. That's possible.
And that there is support in the specs and in some of the libraries for getting a new refresh token when you get a new access token.
Yes.
So you get 2 new tokens
Yeah.
instead of 1. And that would mean that we don't have refresh tokens hanging around for ages, which allow you to get access tokens, and it just keeps things a bit more secure. I was just wondering whether that was something that was still on anybody's, or yours in particular, Sebastian's radar in terms of something we should or shouldn't do.
I think we didn't do anything with it because we were not sure if Ember Simple Auth supports new refresh tokens. But that's something I can try out when doing the rework of the data structure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just waiting to test and see if it's possible.
Could you add this issue to my list in the Sprint Epic?
Yep, I will do.
Quick note about Ember Simple Auth. I know it's in the newest version is in beta. I'm not sure whether it'd be a good idea. It probably still wouldn't be a good idea to update it while it's in beta, but it's been that way for a while, and it would fix, I think, a couple of things. But I'm not sure.
It has been in...
Like, the newest version has gone through a few beta versions for, like, a couple of months now.
Yeah, and beta 3 is about 20 days old, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
There's also been quite a big rewrite of chunks of it, so at least having up-to-date PR against the beta version would be useful testing.
I have one that's a couple versions behind that I can rebase really quick and see if there's any breaking things. So.
Cool.
Yeah, beta 3 was released 21 days ago.
Looking through the issue list, I think there's a couple of bugs related to local storage. And then there's one that's just like some update stuff that they're waiting on. But I think it'll probably go to a full version sometime soon.
Yeah.
Cool. I've updated the Sprint Epic to reflect that conversation. Anybody else got anything else that they want to talk about today?
This is just a quick note. Oh, sorry. You can go.
I was going to mention the time zones PR. I mean, there's been some more discussion about something last week whilst I was away. Where are we at with that? Is it almost ready to go, or?
It's blocked because there is basically something completely different to the pull request is the handling of permalinks. And handling of permalinks hasn't been considered, and I don't at the moment even have a plan or a clear plan for how to resolve that. So I don't really want to merge that part until we at least have a plan for what we're going to do, because otherwise it just ends up being inconsistent across the different places where dates are used. It's something where I'm going to have to go and do some research and figure out how it's handled in other places and try and come up with a sensible way forward. It could require a data update, which would mean it would need to go in after as part of the 005 data updates. It might need other things, not sure at the moment, but at the moment it's blocked, and I should probably put that it's blocked on there, or the pull request. It of itself is working fine. There's nothing wrong with the actual pull request. It's just something. It's a completely separate aspect.
Okay, cool.
Austin?
Yeah, this is kind of just, it's not super important, but something I mentioned last week, I believe, to Hannah, I think, was about inline comments in the code. And this is kind of just a off the top of my head thought, because I was working on some of that for some of my own stuff, like generating documentation using something like UEDoc. I know it wouldn't be applicable for like people using the blog because they don't use the code. But for new people getting started with the Ember side of things, it might be helpful to have documented a little bit some more of the components themselves, or components and routes and whatnot. I don't know where exactly that documentation would like live, but there's just a thought.
Because we have all inline documentation on the server side, which gets generated using a tool called Docker, which is really confusing because it's not the Docker that everyone knows. But if you run grunt docs, it generates documentation for the server side, and there's been half a plan for a while to host that at code.ghost.org. And I think Docker can generate docs for the client side as well as the server side. It doesn't. I don't think it distinguishes. So the only concern that I have with that is that we'd have two different tools if we used YUIDoc.
But there is one thing that's nice. There is an Ember add-on for it, for UIDoc. Basically just run an Ember command. That could be part of, just tacked on to the grunt build for the docs. That will just build it and generate it wherever you want it to go.
Right,
So
but the docs that are already in place already generate documentation from any comments it finds in the Ember code.
Yeah, I guess
It doesn't need to be two different tools.
I have to play around with how it looked with client-side stuff, because I know UIDoc does some nice inheritance stuff, but I haven't played around with Docker, so I'll have to see.
I'm all for switching the tool over if you think you can get something more useful, because the problem with a lot of the tools out there is they get created by someone for a small project, and then they don't get updated, so they kind of fall behind, whereas YUIDoc is obviously something a little bit more, because it's part of YUI, it's got more maintainers, maybe it's more established, more stable. But
it is what all of, like, Ember Simplauth uses it for its docs, Ember and Ember Data use it for the documentation, the API docs, so there's a lot of big projects, I think, that use it.
Yeah, Docker's just a little library that was output by somebody at GoSquad, I think. So I'm not precious about which tool, I just don't think there's any need to add a different tool to Ember. It's a case of we would change the tool we already have, and then make better use of it. But what Docker does is it takes JSDoc and Markdown, and then outputs really nice files from that.
Yeah, I think so. UIDoc does the same thing. It just includes some handlebars helpers in those Markdown. So
Nice. Okay, well, it's worth having a look at if you're interested. Yeah. So that's about it from me. Has anyone else got anything else they want to? No. Cool. Yeah, I think we've got a clear plan with slightly smaller tasks in it for the next 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll. The next 2 weeks are slightly more focused on the open source project rather than the internals, as the internals get overhauled bit by bit. We're getting there. What else was I going to say? Oh, I've covered the release. Release will be at some point in the next 2 weeks. Not sure which, when, or what version, but it will happen. Other than that.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome. Right. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Anna.
See you all in a week.
See you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you, bye.